Hi, and welcome to Making Music. My name is Dan Aronie, and I will be your host for the next half hour. This show is sponsored by Guitar Showcase in San Jose, California, and I've been with them since August 28, 1974, 9:45 a.m., but who's counting? Now, for you musicians and preschoolers, that's 32 years, but I don't mean to give a bad rap to the preschoolers. This show will focus on the local musicians and all the great stories that go along with them, including my guest today. We'll also be talking about vintage guitars, vintage amps, and that whole vintage market that seems to be exploding right now. It's even since 6 months ago, the market has gone 30 to 40%. And we'll also be talking about these little guys right here. We have a gentleman in, Val King from King Amplification, and he's going to be talking about tubes. Now this little guy right here, a 6L6 GC, is still ruling the roost after 50, 60 years. It's no explanation with all the digital and analog that's on the market, but here it is. It's been great, and we'll be talking about tube amps and vintage tube as well. But this show today is actually starting with a phone call I got from my guest today, Brian Connors. And he called me last October, got on the phone, and he said, Dan, my buddy Herbie is selling his recording studio, Cyclops, and some of the gear, and I need someone to come help me appraise it. And can we meet and go up? And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest and friend and musician, Brian Connors.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you
Very
for
nice
being
to be
with
here.
us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, so I must first confess that by day I'm a venture capitalist. So although I've been playing guitar since I was 7 years old, which is far too long than I'd rather recount, but been a passionate musician. And by night I play in a regular band, and I'm also an avid guitar collector.
We'll talk about formative ventures. I want to hear.
Okay, so formative ventures. Yeah, that was. This follows my 30-year career in the high-tech game, starting in 1970-something, when my dad advised me to, maybe in case this guitar thing didn't work out, it would be a good idea to get an engineering education.
Now, can I say something real quick? Because when I think about venture capitalists, I love that word venture because I think about a Star Trek episode,
Yeah.
and to go where no man has gone before with capital.
It could be called adventure capital. There are certainly plenty of times in which it was more of an adventure than I'd like, but yeah, following a career in several startup companies, LSI Logic Corporation, Synopsys, C-Cube, very successful, and decided to get into the side where I'm actually helping finance some of the new ventures in Silicon Valley.
Now, how does that go into Herbie now?
You got to have a lot of money to buy vintage guitars and things, so you got to have a real job.
Now, talk about how you got involved with Herbie, because I know that was through a venture capital.
In a way, yeah. To getting involved with Herbie, it goes back to my passion as a kid in high school to one day own a recording studio, and I did after my first success in Silicon Valley. Bought a recording studio, TRS, in Sunnyvale. Worked that with my partner Scotty Smith for 20 years probably, and later in that adventure, we set up a small independent record label called Treefort Records. Okay. Because the studio we nicknamed the Treefort because it was a comfortable place to hang out. We had some great local acts, one of which was Inca.
Now we have a picture here.
Yeah, we do actually.
If we can, right here, with a picture of you holding a picture that says Abraxas,
right.
Inca with Herbie Herbert.
Right. So that's it. Actually, was that Inca was our band. Herbie was with Abraxas. Abraxas was a band. It was basically the old Santana band, less Carlos Santana. So it was Neil Schon and Greg Raleigh, and I think Ross Valerie played. And it just so happened that at one time my band and his band were performing together at the Fillmore. And but it turns out that's not the first time I met Herbie. I mean, it wasn't then that I met Herbie. I met Herbie one time when our band, Inca, won some BAMI awards. I got involved with Tom Lipinski, who was the producer of the BAMIs, a friend of his, Tom Panos. We all became good buddies, and it was Tom, really the Toms, that introduced me to Herbie, and we made the
And I know Tom also because he was running Mountain Winery for
That's
a
correct.
while.
That's correct. In fact, that's the original time I met Tom was Tom Lipinski, that is. We were actually considering buying the Mountain Winery and putting those concerts back on. And that was, that he was going to run it and I was going to own it. And then another group came in and bought it. But the good thing is it's back in operation.
Yeah, well, let's go back to our buy now. we have this. I get this call in
Right.
October from you,
Right.
and it's exciting. I got to tell you, I
That
was just thrilled.
That was a day.
And you call me and you say, Brian, Herbie has this collection. I didn't know. I swear I'm out of the loop, I guess, a little bit because I didn't really know Herbie's background, and so I get the call. We meet up at your place off Sand Hill Road, and we drive up to his studio.
Right. Well, it came about very serendipitously because it was actually I was at a gig of Lenny Williams, the Lenny Williams band. Lenny used to be the frontman and lead singer for Tower of Power and on their big hits and so forth. And so after the show, I was talking to Lenny one day, and he says, "Do you know that Herbie Herbert's selling a studio?" And I'm like, "No, I hadn't talked to Herbie at the time in a year." And so I said I was just shocked, and my mind immediately, I mean, I love Herbie dearly, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but my mind immediately went to the vintage gear.
Yeah.
And so I went up and talked to Herbie about it, and we couldn't decide, how to do this properly. So I said, I've got an idea. I'll call my buddy Dan at Showcase. He's an expert. We'll get up here and do some appraisals. And I think I told you that maybe if you were real nice to him, he'd let you buy a few
That's
pieces.
correct. You sure did. And I'll tell you what a treat. Because we get to the building, and this building is such a sty from the outside.
Decrepit, yeah.
I mean, absolutely decrepit looking. But if you want to hide great gear and not have anyone pay any attention to
That
this
was the
building,
point.
that was the building. I mean, we walked in,
And
the
a
minute-
beautiful, beautiful place inside.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely incredible. And
just
we walk
nirvana.
in, and there is gold records on every single wall we saw.
Every inch of wall space.
Of all the Journey, million sales, 2 million sales, 5 million sales. I mean, it was all
His
over the place.
Santana stuff. He managed Santana for a while. Steve Miller, Mr. Big, Roxette. The guy is an icon in the San Francisco music scene.
Yeah, and so I walk in, and we see the backdrop of the amps that are all sitting there. And as you can see, the amps on the back of the stage here, all the tweed pieces that we have, and we'll go into some of the stories that Herbie told. But it was basically, for me anyway, it was looking at the holy
was a
grail
once-in-a-lifetime
of
opportunity.
guitars and amplifiers, and it was salivating. There was no description.
There's a sickness
that does it
associated
yeah,
with this.
right. And we talk about gas, the guitar acquisition syndrome, as they call it, and we all suffer from it. My boss has it worse than anybody, and I knew you
true.
have it, and Herbie had it. But let's go through some of the buys. Now, I think we have some tape
We do.
of some of the buy, and we'd like to go into that now if we could, of Herbie talking about some of the pieces that we purchased. And basically what we did to set it up real quick, well, here, we got Herbie on the tape now, and we'll watch that.
Just for 1960, we got the plastic handle. It had the knobs backwards, which is really an interesting feature. Bass, treble, volume, instead of volume, bass, treble, like that. And so that's a unique identifying feature. And the 310 Bandmaster sound is really, really special. And then, and somewhere there is a letter. I don't know, did we not have the case, or is that the case for it that's talked about this being a one piece? Maybe Scott would be able to regenerate that.
What was his name again? Scott what?
Scott Barrett.
Scott Barrett.
Oh, yeah.
And he's actually working with Steve Miller to this very day. I helped him get that. And this is really, it weighs a lot, but it's excellent for the studio. I played on stage, eventually, osteoporosis in a box right here. But it's got the P90 Sopar pickups, and just, I guess the deal is that all of these guitars, until this one was made, had laminated tops. And weren't made out of one piece, where they just routed just for this little band.
So this bit you just saw
And,
of the gold records on the
Scott
wall was
a
the
fat
entrance
guy
to the
that just
studio,
couldn't fathom
which was
taking
just,
these guitars out of their cases.
you instantly knew you were in a special place.
When I got 'em. And there's
This
still
guitar
a
that
great
Herbie's
shape
holding
they
is
have
the
them
red
played.
wine-colored Les Paul. It was a
This
one-piece
and the 50,
guitar, as opposed to most of them having a
Les Paul,
laminated
which
top.
is almost all the rhythm
This is one that Tom
guitars.
Murphy made, the famous custom guitar builder at Gibson.
Yeah, this one, I was told that this is a 1950, and if somebody's telling you it's a 52, then the next question has to be, well, when did they come up with a tune-o-matic tailpiece?
Right.
Because this doesn't have a tune-o-matic.
This guitar is
And,
one in my
surely
collection that I
if,
bought from Herbie.
something like
This
that
is
was
a
available,
1952
they
Les Paul,
would
probably one of the
save
first
themselves a
ever
lot
built.
of grief of getting this guitar in tune and the string heights, and because without being able to adjust the strings, to have it in tune here and here.
The intonation.
The intonation, you know, one octave up, to have it still be in tune, you know, would be really, really tough. Yeah, this is another one of the pieces from Scott Beret. And this, of all the pieces I've ever collected, ever, this was the one that belonged in acrylic. It was so completely and utterly perfect. And with the tags on it in the light cardboard alligator case, it was literally under a lady's bed in Seattle, Washington, or Tacoma, Washington. And Scott literally told me about pulling it out from under the bed and saying, wow, and you know, and so he found this thing, and it was such a player.
Yeah, it is. Do you still have the tags for it? You said you had the tags at one point?
I did. It was so meaningless to me.
Yeah.
I want to get
You never think
throw the
about it
cases
either.
over there, put it on the rack, hit it, you know. And I started thrashing it and playing it, you know. I mean, you know, you want to make an omelet, you got to break an egg, you know. And that's I wanted to make music, and these are not. I'm not into that museum thing.
Yeah. Anyway, that's some of the tape of the buys.
Give
and
people a
some of the
flavor for
pieces.
Herbie Herbert.
Yeah, and what some great
What a
pieces
character.
too. Now I heard that Herbie had a triple bypass about a month ago. Can
He
you
did.
tell me about that?
He did. Well, it was a scary thing. I mean, a few of us that are close to him, Tom Panos, a very close friend of his, have been after him to get himself in shape, and sure as heck he started having some problems and any kind of physical exertion. And at the urging of Tom, I think he got it checked out, and they determined he needed, I believe, a triple bypass.
Yeah.
Shortly after we did the buy, but it was about the first of the year here, I think. And so he's now recovering and recovering nicely. I just spoke with him
Well,
recently.
certainly our prayers are
So he's
for
doing
him to
great.
recover.
Most definitely.
Herbie, we need you back. Now, also, since he sold Cyclops, he's also running this company called Nocturne.
Right. Nocturne is a company that Herbie's had for a long time. That Herbie was one of the guys that originally did those big, started with the Day on the Green, I believe, those concert series, doing those outdoor venues in the stadiums he was the first one to do the nighttime shows and the big monitors.
So he does the sound and lighting, is that correct?
He does the sound, mostly lighting and video and so forth for the big outdoor shows. I mean, the biggest of the big, U2 and you know, all the big acts.
Now, this last year he did, I think you told me he was doing Paul McCartney tour.
Yes, doing Paul McCartney
and
as
Bon
we speak.
Jovi
Yep.
tour as
Bon
well.
Jovi, that's right.
So that whole last U.S. tour with Paul McCartney.
Right, and that company
him as
moved
well.
to Illinois to be in the center of the country because of various expense issues with running a business out of San Francisco.
Right,
and that's what precipitated the sale of the studio.
And do you know what that was? I mean, as far as why he had to leave San
Well,
Francisco?
it's basically the employment, unemployment tax and all these other kind of things that
we
very
hear about that
expensive
from
here in
time to
California,
time, right?
yeah.
Well, let's go over it. Because I wanted to talk about some of these amps as well that we have behind us. And
we have the pieces here that Herbie talked about in the
right,
video.
and so going back to the buy again, I came in and we saw all these amps, we're appraising them, and basically you did the first buy. Herbie wanted to know what retail prices were, so he basically had us sit down. We were going off probably the main book that's used, which is the Vintage Price Guide. And this is really the key book. There's a lot of books that are on the market right now, but this seems
was
to be the
published by
one that...
Vintage Guitar Magazine.
Yeah, the Vintage Guitar Magazine. And this is an absolute great book for any of you collectors who are out there or people that are just getting into the collecting market. This is absolutely a must for you guys to get. It has virtually every guitar, every amplifier, every effect box, you name it. It's the kind of the Bible for guitar collectors right now. There's several other books that are on the market, but this one in particular gets closer to what the value is, and because it's changing so much, you always get a second opinion. When people come into our store and they say, I say their guitar's worth $2,000, and they go, no, it isn't, it's worth $25,000. I say, well, if you don't like what I say, go see another doctor, and eventually, if they all say $2,000, then it's not $2,500 or $3,000. But anyway, this is a great book to get. Real quick on some of the buys that we got. So we sat there, we appraised up this whole collection,
right?
And you went and you bought this.
Semi-nuts.
I said, how are you going to get this by your wife?
Yeah, well, that's another matter.
But tell us the first piece you bought out of the collection.
As I recall, the first one I wanted was this 56 Strat.
Let's hold that up.
This 1956 Stratocaster, two-tone sunburst. Lots of playware. This guitar, as all these guitars, has been played in the studio by, every musician that came through Herbie's
And
studio.
he said Carlos,
Oh yeah, Carlos,
G.E. Smith from
G.E.
Saturday Night
Smith,
Live,
Tommy Castro, Neil Sean,
and all the band members from Journey
and all
as
the
well.
yeah, they've all played them.
So this has some great
so it's
DNA
got some
on
history.
it for
Yeah,
the,
great
for the
DNA.
guitar lovers.
And a great player with great sound. The other one was tough, but was this 58 Strat, which is a 3-tone sunburst with the maple neck. But it's the cool thing about this is that it's really unique with the hardtail. It's not a tremolo guitar.
Right.
And it's great for bending.
And I know Herbie
Getting great
talks
notes.
about that in one of his stories.
Yeah, he does. That's right.
About the hardtail over the tremolo
Because
system.
as his band Cyclops, he likes to bend the note as far as it'll go.
Right. And then the third guitar.
These other guitars here, well, this one was right up there in the top. This is a 1950 something, probably 52,
Yeah.
being the first year is documented of Les Paul manufacture. So this has got to be one of the first very, very few Les Pauls made. I think that what Herbie told us about this in the Red Wine one was a lot of the rhythm tracks for his last 2 albums were recorded by Neil Sean on these guitars. There's so much green, people grease and goo
Oh, this has
in this
mojo.
guitar. It's
This
got
is what they
mojo
call
to
mojo,
die
right.
for, without a
Yep.
doubt. Big P90 pickups that are beefy as can be. We also have this 56 TV model in pristine condition. A great player.
And he talked about this in the film.
talked
as far
about
as
that in the video we
Scott
saw.
Beret, for those of you who don't know, is the manager for a Steve Miller Band. And so a lot of these pieces he talked about through the tape, and he got from Scott Beret.
That's right.
And in fact, some of the pieces, this Marshall, in fact, the JTM 45 that we got, this came from England, and Scott picked it up when he was touring with Steve Miller, and he sold it to Herbie as well.
That's right.
And that was the main amp that was used in the studio for rock.
Oh,
for
most
more of the
definitely.
rock
I've been
stuff.
on many sessions in the studio with that
And
amplifier.
that was it.
And that guitar.
Now let's go to the second. I think it's probably time, and we should go to the second video now.
Sure.
And let's see what Herbie has to say.
And there's the other Strat that I got from Scott Beret. This is a V-neck 56. And when you put it in your hand, you know why they call them a V-neck.
Yeah. I love
You
that
know,
neck.
and this one's really good. They didn't have, you put new strings on this.
I did.
Yeah,
You could tell.
hell yeah. Yeah, and so this is before they came out with 3-tone Sunburst. That wasn't until 58. And it's
stories
a good
on
one,
who's-
good sounding.
Who's played it? Any of those kind of things?
So many people have played these guitars, every one of them. And I'll tell you, the guys that maul these guitars in a loving way. And just can't wait to get here. Usually once a year, G.E. Smith, who's the leader of the Saturday Night Band and quite a collector himself, has gone through every single guitar personally. Harvey Mandel, who fancies himself a luthier, has gone through every one of these guitars. David Lindley, who is a luthier.
He's a big-time collector.
And big-time collector has gone through every guitar. They have also played every amplifier.
Tommy Castro.
Tommy Castro has made, on the white Strat, 3 of Tommy's records were made with that Strat. Now he puts down the guitar he lives with, his woman, and just puts it down and makes the record on that white Strat, because that white Strat has the Strat sound.
Yeah.
All Strats you want to think have a Strat sound, and I guess they all do, but not the quintessential Strat sound. And that white guitar is so special. That's the one that's Rusty's guitar.
Yeah.
I'll never know who Rusty is or was.
Miller playing.
How about on that white Strat we got? Anyone, that was the white 60 Strat.
One of my favorite pictures is up in Wallala, and I make these collages, giant picture collages. And one time I was doing a gig. There was a very special gig at the Golden Gate Yacht Club here in town that was rented to do a retirement party for one of the great roadies initially. So many started as roadies, but this guy retired as the best, the greatest production manager ever. And his name was Jerry Stickles. And he was the original guitar roadie for Jimi Hendrix. And in those days, all the roadies knew each other. And I had such respect for Jerry. He went on and did all the Jimmy shows and moved on and would do one-offs and different events and different tours. McCartney rarely moved without him. Queen, all those Queen productions that were so fabulous. The Crown Rising with the lights, all those, really fantastic things. I had him do Steve Miller for me for years. The first time I ever showed up at a Steve Miller gig with, I brought Jerry Stickles to introduce him in Ketchum, Idaho, brought him to dinner at Steve's house. Okay, he's kind of a gruff hippie looking guy. I go, Steve, he is the man, just trust me. And we get to the first gig in Canandaigua, New York at Finger Lakes, this little outside amphitheater. And there's Jerry Stickles on the lawn, Hawaiian shirt at all times. He goes, there's my new production manager, Steve, is climbing my clock. I go, Steve, when you see that, you're going to learn, and eventually, and soon, you're going to have a huge smile on your face. No offense, Steve, but even this production, which is maybe the biggest you've mounted with video and all the bells and whistles, is such child's play for Jerry Stickles that, he's catching up on all the sleep he lost with Paul McCartney and Queen and Jimi Hendrix. Right now, on this tour, this is a walk in the park. And he took umbrage at that, but he found out that is exactly what that means. It's totally done. It's totally together. There's, everything's been quadruple checked and is in precision.
That's what that means.
And so we were here and we had the Hendrix estate given all the Hendrix platinum records at their current certification levels, which was 6, 8, and 10 million units on Are You Experienced and Electric Ladyland and Axis Boulder's Love and all those smash hits.
Welcome back. Now we have a couple more guitars that we want to talk about. And one of the greatest stories, and thank you, Brian, because this was one of the ones that you didn't buy.
Yeah.
And Herbie's, Herbie
if there's
let
one
me,
I regret you
right.
taking away from me, it would be this one.
But let's talk about what Herbie called the Rusty guitar.
This is Rusty's Strat. It was whatever that means.
Up.
There was somewhere along the line a kid named Rusty who owned this guitar and no longer does. But as I recall, the case had Rusty's Strat written on it or something like that.
Right.
And this is the one that Herbie mentioned that Tommy Castro recorded his last 2 albums on. Put his own guitar that he's married to down.
He talked about the woman down.
And recorded his 2 last albums on this guitar. And I'll tell you, as a player, this thing is to die for. It is the sweetest neck and has the greatest Strat tone I've ever heard.
But the story, I guess, was again that this boy Rusty walked into Guitar Center in Berkeley.
Yeah, that's right.
And Herbie happened to be there. They were trying to kill him on the
Somebody
price.
was trying to buy it for him.
So Herbie goes to the manager, goes, please let me take this guy outside. Let me give him some real money on it. Don't do this to him.
And Herbie gave the kid 3 times.
And the manager let him go out back, outside the store. And Herbie paid him more, and that's how Herbie got this guitar. Great story.
And he did it. It's interesting, you're right, because Herbie, that's Providence, because Herbie did this to do the kid a favor because he was getting ripped off, getting creamed. And lo and behold, Herbie did a great thing for himself because this is such a player.
Yeah. No, that's
Sweetheart
a great story.
of a guitar.
And then the other story that Herbie told us was that, and this pertains to the BC Rich that's here, is that Neil was in the studio one day and Neil goes, Herbie goes, Neil, you've never given me a guitar.
Yeah.
Give me a guitar, basically is what it
After all
came
these
down
years.
to. So Neil, Sean, hands Herbie this BC Rich, and I want to show you the picture. And there's Neil playing it on Day on the Green, I think it's 1978, with Ted Nugent and Ronnie Montrose. And then backstage, he's hamming it up with Ted Nugent with the guitar in his hand as well.
Right.
And what a great story that is. And that wasn't even one of the main guitars. This was kind of almost a second, second choice for us, kind of a second tier piece that was down.
Then the pictures started coming out.
Right. And then we saw the pictures
the stories,
that came
then you
along
gotta
with
own
it.
it.
But let's go through the amps real quick because we have the great the tweeds that we have, and we'll start from the left. This is the one on our left side. We start with a 1956 Super, and then we have a 1956 Harvard, and then a 59 Vibrolux. We also have the 57 Pro with a single 15, and a 58 Tremolux, and a 61 Princeton. This is again for tweed.
Part of what we were able to.
Just part of what we were able to get, but for tweed collectors, this is holy grail stuff.
question.
This is absolutely.
And I've played every one of them. They
top
all play
tier.
perfect.
Right. Yeah.
Perfect. In fact, most of them, if they don't have the original tubes in them, the tubes are in the back of the amp.
And the other cool thing is that when we walked into the studio and there was things, every one of these guitars had straps on them that were on the hooks. So
That's right.
basically what we were able to do is just any musician that's recording there, they just grab the guitar off the stand, put
Plug
it,
it in and
strap it
go.
on, and plug it in and off and running. So it was such a treat.
It was an awesome day.
And so we were there, I think, for 4 or 5 hours that day doing the appraisals. And basically, what Herbie wanted from us is just I want you to appraise it at high blue book and low blue book. But I remember it was really funny because after you were done buying the equipment from Herbie goes to me, he says, "Well, Brian's my buddy. He gets to pay low retail for it. I don't know you. I've never
I'm gonna
met you
stick it to
before.
you."
You're paying high retail price." And I get my boss on the line. I say, "Gary, we'll never have a chance at anything like this again. It's unbelievable.
It's now or never.
Pay the price." I mean, because in the way the vintage market's going, what is high retail today in 6 months is middle or low retail. In 2 years is off the charts wholesale. And that's the crazy part of this vintage market.
But my thing was, I wanted Herbie as a dear friend and such a valuable collection that, I had to own it or a part of it, but, I just had to treat him right.
Yeah.
And the only way to do it was to bring in an expert, and I thank you for
Well, thank you. I mean, I just
being the
consider it
honest
one of the best days
expert.
of my 32 years that it was actually absolutely a highlight for me.
Your honesty might have cost me a little more money than I've gotten away with.
I know.
But at least I feel good that Herbie
Yeah,
got a
but
good
in the long run, it all comes back.
I know. Sooner or later it comes back to you.
Yeah. So, and I know Herbie just had stuff on auction this weekend as well.
Actually, yeah. What remains of what we didn't buy is just this vast trove of rock memorabilia and posters and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Even my wife, this auction, which was online at backstageauctions.com, they ran off the whole weekend of Herbie's stuff, and I bought another 1957 Strat from Ross Valerie of Journey.
Yeah. Well, it
Great
looks like
day.
we got to wind it down. We're
Thanks,
coming to the
Dan.
end of the show. I want to thank you for joining us. This has been absolutely a treat for me, and it's been great reminiscing about that whole
Likewise.
sale. And
You're a great friend.
No, thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Thanks for everything.
Appreciate it. And this is Dan from Making Music. I'm glad you could join us today, and I hope you join us next week. We have a special guest on, Paulo Jones, and we'll see you then.
Run, fuck,